What it is, what it ain't. Take a bad bitch, still stink. Jay the dude will go hard in the paint. I'm about to try to put up a reaction video. Final Witness will be the show today. I've never seen this episode. I ain't gonna say too much. I'm gonna try to stay as quiet as I can. Without further ado, let's get into it.
That's me lying there. And this is the hospital where I work. Used to work. I spent the last 6 years helping doctors save lives here. But not today. Today, no one could save me. A week ago, I had a taxi driver who told me he saw demons. Of course, I thought he was crazy, but I'm beginning to think he wasn't. What if there are demons that live within some of us? My name is Donna Wheeler, and if only I had seen things more clearly, I wouldn't be lying here today. That's my husband, Mark. My heart breaks thinking of him on that day.
Is she okay? Does anyone know? Donna, is she okay? Does anyone know? Is Donna alright? Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Oh well.
Mr. Winger, Detective Williamson, my partner, Detective Scott. I'll let you know we're here to help, and if there's anything we can do, please let us know.
Okay. Checking up on me.
Working on it, trying to get you stabilized. Let me know when you got yourself gathered together. Some questions we have to ask. You okay now?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I was at the office at the temple, and I received a phone call late in the afternoon. Something had happened, and Mark Winger asked us to phone his rabbi, and I rushed over. Mark was in the back bedroom. I was brought in. I had to break the news to Mark that Don had died. I don't know, I remember sitting with Mark for a bit, and he was a wreck, and I was trying to comfort him.
Pulled up to the road, and it had been blocked off, by the police. And my husband came out and he told me that Don was dead. And it was horrifying. It was so unfathomable. Because when strikes, you feel the permanence of it is immediate.
The first victim, we was already told, was Donna Winger. The second victim was an unknown white male lying on the floor. On the table was a .45 caliber semi-automatic weapon, a yellow mug, and a package of cigarettes. There was a large amount of blood spatter, and between the two victims was a bloody chrome shafted claw hammer. Mark was very distraught. He was concerned about his wife, and he was also asking who that person was when he came into his home.
Why? Why not?
I guess the story starts about 6 years ago when Mark and I moved from Florida to Springfield, Illinois, the land of Lincoln.
Here we go.
It's the first place I ever lived where you felt like you could leave your door unlocked. You
No.
asked about moving here. It's not exactly Palm Beach, you know. We didn't know a soul. It was kind of lonely at first. But after a while, one friend becomes 10 friends, and then, before you know it, it's your home. It was Mark's work that brought us here. He was a nuclear engineer. He worked with numbers all day, stuff that would go over my head, but he used to be in the military, and he loved the precision of it. My job required precision too, but really it required a strong stomach. I was a scrub tech in the OR, and I loved every gory moment of it. That's my best friend Deanne Schultz. She would always tease me, how could a nice girl like me get such a kick out of assisting an amputation? We were really lucky. We had a great house on a cute little block, but we both really wanted to start a family. We had been trying at it for almost 6 years. It just wasn't happening.
Get a regular guy, those colors really good.
I get those from you later, okay?
Once we got Mark calmed down, I asked him if he could tell us what had occurred.
He was working out downstairs on his treadmill when he heard a thump upstairs.
When he got to the master bedroom, he seen his 3-month-old child laying on the bed, which he said Donovan had never done. So he got his semi-automatic weapon out of the nightstand.
And as he walked down the hallway, he observed a man standing over his wife, beating her with a hammer. He immediately shot the man, and as the man went down, he said the man attempted to get up, and he shot him a second time.
And he grabbed his hand.
I know who this is.
At that point, he says, "Oh my God, that's the guy that's been harassing us all week."
Mark did know the man on the floor. And I guess you could say I knew him too.
Right.
But if the police were hoping they'd get some answers out of him, I'm afraid they were too late. This was my home. Every Sunday morning, I'd make coffee and sit down at that table and call my mom. If I'd have known that this past Sunday would be our last talk, I would have never let her hang up.
We got a phone call, and my dad said to me, Ira, I've got some very bad news to tell you.
I screamed. I remember screaming. Ira, tell me what is wrong. And finally he said to me, Sarah Jane, Donovan murdered. And I said to him, what are you talking about?
It would be days before Mom could listen to the whole story. An intruder killed me with a hammer he found on my table. And when my husband killed him, the intruder's name was Roger Harrington.
Mark said he'd been having problems with the driver.
I was in Chattanooga. I was on a training center for my job.
4 or 5 days before this incident, his wife had went down to visit her parents in Florida.
When she came back, this guy picked her up and he said, Lewis, drive her home.
I don't know.
Driving, speeding erratically. She had the baby in the car and they were scared to death.
You know how old the baby is?
She's 3 months old.
You know those times in your life when you say, remember this moment? I had a lot of those with Mark.
She was the bubbly one, Renee was the quieter one. She was incredibly friendly, chatty. Mark had a very dry sense of humor. He could be quite funny, and they loved each other.
If I ever got upset, Mark would make me laugh. You want a big house in the country? Should I rob a bank? Not pregnant yet? At least it's fun trying.
They wanted children, and they tried a long time, and it was proving difficult. I know they had an active sex life, because she told me. She spoke about everything. She was
I practically talked Dan's ear off about it. I talked to anyone who would listen. It was all I could think about.
She did have some surgery to see if there was a problem with her being able to get pregnant, which there was.
She was so disappointed and so sad, and I was so sad for her.
Laparoscopic surgery, and I found out that my uterus can't implant again.
That's sad. The music in the background.
Talk it out. One of the physicians walked in and said, "Is there anyone that knows somebody that wants to adopt a baby?" Well, I have a young teen mother who wants to put up her baby for adoption. So it just seemed like fate.
Here she is. Everyone take a look.
Oh, man.
Hi, India.
This is gonna get deep.
Beautiful princess. She loves so much pain. Honestly, I couldn't believe it at first. I mean, we had started talking about adopting. We had expected years of waiting and red tape, and then all of a sudden, here she is. I know all new moms say this, but she was perfect. I just kept touching her, and I was amazed at how tiny her fingernails were. In the end, we only had 3 months together. She'd hear about me, but she wouldn't remember me.
Is there anything I can do again? Anything you need right now?
Mark asked if he could have something to drink. So Doug went into the kitchen to get in the refrigerator, and that's when he noticed a 3-page note there.
He entered the van and he introduced himself to me as Robert. He talked to me about being spiritual and started telling me about the spirit Dom. He told me that Dom was around for 10 years. He reveals himself in the form of a dragon. He told me things like Dom makes him do things, some bad things, like sets car bombs and killing people. He said sometimes Dom takes him out of his body and makes him fly above the trees. I felt very nervous because he was telling me all that. He was speeding excessively. I felt as if my life and the life of my daughter were in the hands of a nut.
You're doing good. You're doing good. You're saying it.
You said there was this thing called like Dom, a god or some demonic thing?
The lead detective in the case was Detective Charlie Cox, who was a very experienced detective with the Springfield Police Department, and he had a history with Roger Harrington.
I owned a trailer park and Roger and his wife rented a trailer from me. And they had domestic disputes that I had to get involved in. I knew him as a very volatile type subject. Later determined he had been institutionalized a couple times, which, yeah, a mentally disturbed person could have done this while being controlled by Dom.
Mr. and Mrs. Schultz, can you tell me about the marriage relationship? Were they happy?
I never saw them fight once. They were always very happy. No, not even a little,
I couldn't imagine what an evil person he was and why he would do such a horrendous thing.
My first thought was he came back and killed her. He was a lunatic and he did obsess about her and he did come back.
In the Jewish religion, the first night you have a prayer service in the evening, and there has to be 10 men available to be able to have this prayer service. And the rabbi was just ready to start the service when Mark walked in with the baby in his hand, and everybody cried. When the police examined the scene and when they listened to Mark's explanation of what happened, the detectives came to the conclusion that Mark Winter acted in self-defense. They reported that finding to the state's attorney, and the case was closed within
Y'all believe in this?
By the 10 o'clock news, people knew all they needed to know. A lunatic broke into some poor woman's home and killed her because a demon told him to. But the intruder was killed by the husband. For folks in Springfield, they could go back to normal life. But maybe they wouldn't have felt so safe if they knew what really happened. In the months after I died, Mark became a bit of a local hero. He had killed the bad guy. That was something he never got to do when he was in the army. He wrote a letter to the editor thanking the people of Springfield for their support. He said I was a wonderful, caring, and decent person whose life was needlessly cut short. At first, our moms took turns watching the baby, but Mark hired a full-time nanny so everyone could go back to normal. Mark was slowly putting his life back together. But even though Roger Harrington was dead, his Mark just couldn't let it go.
So, I should bring up the baby to them, I would.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right. And, just sympathize about how Donald loved her, and we loved her.
Mark Winger filed a civil suit against BART Transportation. The allegation is that BART Transportation should not have hired Roger Harrington based on his past record. For BART Transportation, the stakes were quite high. They could have been subjected to a multi-million-dollar judgment. That could have easily have, bankrupted the company.
You know how a good doctor can just look at you and know something's wrong? For some in Springfield, the case never quite sat right.
Come on, Doug, let this thing go.
Why would Roger Harrington bring coffee and cigarettes to a murder?
And who was Roger Harrington?
Oh, okay.
He was a good kid, He wouldn't strike at anybody.
This was a kid that would do anything for me. If I asked him for a gallon of milk in the middle of the night, he would have ran and got it because he would have thought, the kids need it.
All he liked to be was sugar. He had 2 nephews, and he, always doing things with the 2 older ones. And I just couldn't see him hurting anybody.
Roger did have a mental illness, but he just talked funny. He had been married to Terry. They had a really rocky marriage. She was always kind of trying to push her buttons. Roger had came home one day from work, and Terry and her ex-husband was throwing his things out the door.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Stop! Stop!
And he got really mad, and he went after her ex-husband. And she kind of got in the way, and Mr. Cox broke that fight up. So from his point of view, I guess he probably thought him to be a violent person to begin with.
Hey, what are you doing?
What is it, Uncle Roger?
I haven't told you about Dom?
Dom.
Right.
Dom was a mask. It was a rubber mask that he hung in his house. Roger was very, very close to my oldest son. And I asked Reggie one day, what does your Uncle Roger say about this Dom character? And he had told Reggie, it's just a mask. It's there to scare people. When the newspaper and all the reports come out saying that this Dom character was telling him to kill people, I was thinking, man, you really got this wrong.
The beneficiary of any life insurance policy of Donna Whitney?
Yes.
And what was the amount of the benefit paid to you?
Roughly $150,000.
Do you know where Roger Harrington made any specific threat to your wife or your child prior to her death?
No, other than driving 85 miles an hour dangerously, erratically. That's, pretty threatening.
Ever a day that goes by that you don't touch your phone or wife?
Not a day. There was a period of time we were trying to have children, and we weren't able to. We became so close. You think you can't get any closer to someone. And then we have a adopted baby, and my wife was so happy. That was the top of our marriage. I can't look at my daughter without thinking about how much God loved her.
Mark called up one day and said, I just want to tell you some good news. The baby is going to have a sibling. The nanny was pregnant, and I thought, oh my God, what is happening here?
The Mark I married was stable and solid. This Mark is changing every day.
I said, Mark, I don't understand. You've always claimed to be such a loyal Jew. Why are you changing your faith? And he said, Judaism is just too difficult and unforgiving. And I said, Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you need forgiveness for?
That house in the country we always talked about? Mark finally got his wish.
As the breach between us and Mark began to grow, you give yourself permission to start thinking the unthinkable. Why, if you heard a noise upstairs, why would you go to your bedroom to get a gun rather than going to where the sound is?
Marrying the nanny is one thing, but Mark stopped by the station to brag to the detectives about it.
You're getting married. I started getting some uneasy feelings about it. And at that point, I went back to Doug and I said, listen, this guy stinks. And I agree with you, we need to try and get the case reopened. But the bosses wouldn't let us open it on our gut feelings alone. And they didn't want to open it without solid evidence.
Ray Duffy, the owner of Bart Transportation, had received a demand from Mark Winger of approximately $1.5 million to settle the lawsuit. As he was considering his options and what he should do, he received an odd phone call.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
You don't know me, but don't settle with Mark Winger.
Uh-oh. It's about to get interesting.
Remember Deanne? The shoulder I used to cry on? She stepped forward, and it turns out she wasn't the friend I thought she was.
Call from Donna's husband, Mark, in July of 1995.
Yeah.
Deanne Schultz, after the murders, her life went on a downward spiral. By 1998, she had tried to kill herself on 3 occasions, one of which was so serious that she was actually placed on a ventilator and nearly died.
Was it unusual for Mark Winger to initiate a phone call to you on Zoom?
Very much so.
Donna told me that you were planning on moving upstate.
He said that he was aware my husband and I were having problems.
What did you believe the intent of his call was?
There was always drama in Deanne's life. If she wasn't helping you through a crisis, she was in one. We picked apart every little problem in her marriage to the point where I thought that maybe a man's point of view would help. So I actually suggested you call her.
He told me that he thought that I was attractive, since he'd been thinking about that for a long time.
What do you think about the idea of getting together?
Did you begin to have an affair with Mark the weekend of July 22nd?
Yes. He hated that Donna could not bear children. He feared that if they divorced, she would take the baby to Florida.
She had the right to. Oh, let me shut up.
Deanne Schultz's statements were an absolute bombshell. There was no history of domestic violence. There was not even a history of arguments. From all appearances, they seemed to be a very happy couple.
My other friends said Deanne might have had a little crush on Mark, but I figured if she did, it was harmless. I mean, Mark and I were crazy about each other.
He said to me that it would be easier if Donna died.
Ooh.
He could take care of it. Ask for my help in just finding Donna. He would be out of town. I told him he was thinking crazy.
This was an extraordinarily important development in the case, because instead of being a man who was happily married, now we have a motive.
Their affair only lasted a few months after I died, but Deanne's story made people see Mark in a different light. If his love for me was a lie, anything was possible.
At that point, they felt there was enough to reopen the case.
The evidence had been transferred to Mark Winger's civil attorney for the civil suit, and the Springfield police called asking for the evidence back.
The first step when you reopen a closed case is to go back and look at what you already have. And it was at this time that the detectives found those Polaroid pictures that had been taken by Officer Berenger.
We didn't even know these Polaroids existed. Officer Berenger, out at the scene that day, went to his car, got his own Polaroid out, and snapped 3 Polaroids at the positions of the bodies before they had been disturbed.
The evidence has been turned over to me by Detective Cox and Williamson. The very first red flag starts with the car itself. It is unusual for a person who is coming to commit a crime to park their car, which doesn't belong in the neighborhood, on the wrong side of the street, headed the wrong direction.
When they searched the vehicle, police found a note inside of the vehicle. It was a bank deposit slip, and on the back was the time at 4:30 p.m., the address, and the name Mark Winger.
The next red flag for me was the pack of cigarettes and a beverage container that was sitting on the end of the dining room table. All of that, when you take it in context, where the car was parked, he didn't bring in a weapon, that note, it looked like he was coming to a meeting. But the Polaroids are absolutely critical.
Unfortunately, the detectives at the scene did not realize that a patrol officer had snapped those photographs.
They're having to listen to the story given, but without the Polaroids, they don't have the ability to see where the 2 victims were actually positioned.
Polaroids, where we get you wrote a report, we attached the photographs to the report, and ultimately looked into evidence. Mark Winger had stated that Roger Harrington was kneeling down right next to Donna Winger's head. He stated that he shot him and that the man fell backwards.
These photographs actually show Mr. Harrington and Donna Winger basically laying in the same direction, which would have been physically impossible to do by the way Mark described what had happened.
My opinion is that this was a staged domestic homicide, and Mark killed both people.
We were conducting an exhaustive investigation. During this time frame, Mark was still living in Springfield. He was still working for the Department of Nuclear Safety. He had remarried. Mark and she had had 3 more children of their own. We knew the stakes of this case. This was a big case, and it was one that on the front end, some mistakes had been made. And so on the second go around, we had to have it right.
I had been dead for 6 long years, while Mark was a free man. But maybe his time was running out. The day they brought the case to the grand jury, detectives had been watching my husband Mark for months. He was starting to suspect something was up, and the police were afraid he might flee the country. The prosecutors had gathered the evidence. Now all they needed was an arrest warrant. And they had to make sure he didn't make a run for it first. Unfortunately for them, Mark had moved out to his dream house in the country. Not an easy place for the police to hide.
Here we go. When Mark Winger left for work that day, instead of turning right to go towards work, he turns left down towards me. I put the car in drive and started heading to town. Well, Mark turned around and started following me. And I, of course, call my supervisor and say, this is just taking a turn for the surreal. Mark Winger is following me to Springfield. said, yes, Mark, I won't follow you anymore.
Girl.
The grand jury, a room full of strangers, heard all the gory details of my life, taken apart piece by piece. It's the kind of thing I would have found fascinating if it hadn't been me.
Detective Doug Williams.
Mark Winter concluded that he wanted to kill his wife. And then about 5 or 6 days prior to the murder, Roger Harrington happened to be the one who drove down.
I'd been waiting to tell Mark about my shuttle ride because I didn't want him to worry while he was traveling.
Right.
But somehow he found out.
Is Donna okay?
Mark saw this as a golden opportunity. He told Deanne that he needed to get that man into his house, and that's exactly what he did.
When Mark got back from his trip, he made me write out the whole thing, so there'd be a record of it.
Donna, don't write it down. Just write it down.
But at the time, I guess I just thought he wanted to be the man of the house and protect her.
They will, trust me.
Mark called Ray Duffy to make a complaint about Roger Harrington. He told Ray Duffy that he wanted to speak with the man, and he wanted to sort things out with the man himself.
I need this job, sir. I need it.
Ray Duffy suspended Roger, and he told Roger that Mark Winter wanted to speak with him.
I'm not sure what the misunderstanding is. I want to make this right.
Why? Is this Roger Harrington? This is Mark Winter.
Mark called, and there were witnesses to that conversation, and where Roger set an appointment to meet with that man in his home.
This dude.
Great. That sounds great. I'll be there.
So much fun. The sun is morning.
It's Mark. I just need to know. I need to know. Will you love me no matter what?
12 coming.
That boy about to get out of his body.
Roger Harrington, after agreeing to a meeting, drives up to the house, broad open daylight, parks on the wrong side of the street, going the wrong direction. Instead of bringing a weapon out of his vehicle, what he brings is a beverage container and a cigarette pack.
Are you Roger? Yeah, Roger. Yeah, nice to meet you. This is Mark. Come on in.
There's a considerable difference in height between Mark and Roger. You'd almost have to be under gunpoint, and Roger would have to be down on his knees in order to effect correctly the trajectory into the top of the head.
Oh. That was deep.
Once that gunshot takes place, Roger Harrington falls face forward onto the carpet, now starting to create our very first blood pool.
Damn.
Donna is reacting to the gunshot, coming into
Shot her
the
too.
dining room area, and that's when he starts beating her in the head with the hammer.
This man crazy. He playing. He pulling.
During that 911 call, as you can hear Roger moaning in the background, Mark told the 911 operator that he could hear his baby crying, and so he hung up on 911. Forensic evidence showed that Roger Harrington's body was rolled over, and he was shot in the head a second time.
You going down. Uh-oh, here they come. You might as well put one in your own top. Did he run? He ain't coming out. Go ahead. I know it's about to. Oh, we should have killed ourselves. We already cowed.
How did it come to this? Was it the things I couldn't see?
Like that don't
Or the
deserve
things I
it.
chose not to?
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or think will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to answer the
It was a milestone because we moved from the investigative phase into the next chapter, which was prosecution.
Got him. FBI, open up. He deserved what he got, but he got off a little easy if you ask me.
Arrested Mark on 2 counts of first-degree murder was the first time he had ever been in trouble with the law. Or in trouble, period. Mark was a good guy, a hero. He played by the rules. This couldn't be the man I fell in love with.
Oh, reality check.
This had to be someone else.
I still couldn't believe that Mark could do this. And I remember saying to Ira, I hope when the trial begins that Mark's attorney can explain all of these things so that we will know that he really did not do this. But that was my dream.
What about losing a family and being somewhere quiet, peaceful, like the country somewhere?
Can't agree with you more.
Mark and I met on a blind date. I almost didn't go that night, but my mom said, how bad could it be?
By cesarean section, and well, I didn't do it, the doctor did, but
Guillotine.
it was so exciting seeing the mother, obviously couldn't hold the baby right away, but when she could, she was so happy, and I just can't wait to have that, to feel like that myself. Okay? I'm so glad your brother set us up.
So glad.
And you do.
She said he was very bright, and that really made her feel very important for some reason. Donna had a learning disability, and school was really hard for her. And when this very bright young man fell in love with her, she was overwhelmed.
He preyed on her.
Nice boy, an intelligent boy who came from a very nice family.
Oh, my dude was a predator. Man, go and execute this.
Read the guilty verdict. It's like being punched in the gut. I mean, I burst into tears.
I was so relieved. Finally, my brother could rest in peace. Donna could rest in peace. They got
Because he didn't deserve that.
My first thought was to turn around and give Mr. and Mrs. Harrington a hug, because they buried a son who the whole city of Springfield felt was a murderer.
The police department had too hastily closed the case and turned a blind eye to some red flags. And to right such a wrong, it felt great.
I don't think there's any way to make sense of letting go. There's just sick and evil people out there that for whatever reason or another develop into these monsters. So the day we arrested him, everyone thought he was the hero. Everyone liked him. They thought he was arrogant, but they still liked him.
I think he felt if he did get divorced, the community would look down on him, and he didn't want that to happen.
I think at some point she was no longer useful to me.
That's crazy.
And I do think the infertility came into it. But why didn't he just divorce her? Why kill her?
You're talking about a vicious person to be able to
You do this shit
hit
for free.
somebody 7 times with a
Fucking
steel
predator.
hammer in the
Man,
head.
he's a horrible
There has
person.
to be something wrong.
He appears to be sweet and kind and wonderful, but in reality, Mark is a monster.
Was it my fault, Mark? Was it because I couldn't bear your children? Did I do something to make you fall in love with me? Wouldn't have happened
Horrible
eventually.
person.
Or maybe there wasn't a reason at all. Maybe it was just a demon. Roger Harrington wasn't normal. You could see he was different right away. His demons were no secret. Maybe that's why people like Roger marry the dangerous ones. It's the ones that look normal that are the real danger.
Right.
The ones that charm us into thinking they're safe. They can be trusted.
Ugh.
They could be anyone. Anywhere. And then, one day, they show us who they really are. There won't be any warning.
The fact that dude almost got away with that, the fact that, like, he a horrible person, like, golly. Like, comment, subscribe if you want more.
Dan Schultz, eating now. Now that she's had an opportunity.
Alright, I'm out.